The recently formed South Bay chapter of the International Association for Near-Death Studies has been meeting monthly with an impressive roster of guest speakers. Today, the Reverend Jim Thomas talks about an out-of-body experience he had in 1968. Since that time, Reverend Jim has become a clinical psychologist and now researches the similarities between the near-death experience, out-of-body experiences, and the dissociative identity disorder. He talks about his findings.
Thank you for being here. This subject is something that I feel very passionate about for good reason. I've lived these things, and I want to tell you a little bit without boring you. I'll go pretty quickly, but I want to tell you how I got involved in all of this and a little bit about my journey and as things have progressed in my life. Well, I want to say, first of all, that we are really onto something here that is going to turn out, I think, to be a very valuable piece of information and a way that we are informed about what is really happening with this near-death experience, because it really speaks to the whole idea of what Descartes called the mind-body problem. Now, it used to be that we thought that there was a mind or something like that inside one body, and that's kind of how we operated. Long about the 16th century, John Milton started talking about the ideas of being out-of-body experiences and this kind of thing. So this is something that has been with us for a long time, and I want to bring you up on some of the contemporary research with this ancient mystery that I call that. I also want to talk about another very interesting facet of the work that I have done for nearly 40 years, and that's working with multiple personality disorders or dissociative identity disorder. And I want to tell you about that and how that plays in all of this, and how I think what we are learning so much from that. So I'm going to start off just telling my stories, just very briefly. I was in the United States Air Force in 1968 when I was being retired for some Agent Orange symptoms. There were 3 people in my squadron that were all of a sudden, all of us came down with the same symptoms, legs swelling, a whole bunch of symptoms that were not very pleasant. And so what happened was that we were all put in an Air Force hospital. And after 3 months, were discharged. And when I got back to my base in Fairchild Air Force Base, Washington, I was immediately sent to Korea, because that was the day the Pueblo crisis came out. I don't know if you remember that. The North Koreans grabbed one of our spy ships called the Pueblo. And I was sent over with 2 C-130s and 2 crews to start beefing up the Republic of Korea, or the ROK, South Korean navigational aids, because literally we could not land an airplane anywhere at night unless we put out smudge pots. It was literally that bad. Nothing worked at any of the airports except the international airport at Seoul. So anyway, that was an experience that really started me on this whole thing, in that there's a couple things you can do in Korea after hours, and one of them is that I chose is to go and spend time at an orphanage. There are Methodist orphanages all over, at least there were at that time. And we went out there along with 2 or 3 NCOs that were with me, and what we did was to go out and dye Easter eggs and hide them for the next morning, which was Easter Sunday. I was out in the field, and I remember them opening the door and all the kids ran out. And the next thing I knew is that I was being taken up, lifted up out of my body. I was way above the earth, and I remember everything looked like a hologram because I could see through it. I could see like space on the other side of the earth by looking through it. And as I looked and saw that, lights lit up in me, boom, 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 like that. And I was told to go become a clinical psychologist. It said that's what I would do. And I did not know how long I had really been gone or anything like that. But I felt the light, felt myself going to the light. I had been diagnosed as having Hodgkin's disease before I was retired from the Air Force. That is what I was retired for, and with the diagnosis of Hodgkin's disease. I thought I was dying. When I was in the hospital, my roommate died. And so I was just scared about all of that. Well, anyway, and after that, I was pretty much slammed back down to the ground, and all the people, men that were with me were shaking me, trying to get me to wake up. And although it was Easter, the library was open, and I went to the library that day on base when I got back to see what a clinical psychologist did. I mean, that was 45 years ago, and so I've been a clinical psychologist in private practice since that time, in addition to spending 10 years being an Episcopal priest, which is very close to my heart. That N.D.E. experience for me changed everything. I was scared to talk about it with anyone. I was reading about 15 years later a book on Buddhism, because I wrote a book on chakras. And in fact, it's back there if you would like that, and to look at it or buy it. And it's all the healing tactics and the interesting things about how chakra energy moves and how we are healed with chakra energy, and how that manifests itself in the growth of our being as we grow older. So I have been a chakra healer, body energy healer for years, and although the time I was a priest, I rarely said anything about that, but used it very much in my sermons. As if you'll think back over my sermons, it's all every sermon was more or less shrouded in the area of near-death experience and chakra healing. So I have that. All right, that was story number one. Story number two is my relationship with Robert Monroe. Robert Monroe was an electrical engineer in the Air Force, and he ended up, after he got out of Vietnam, he went to Faber, Virginia, and bought a radio station. And he was always kind of a ham, and so he had this radio station. In back of the radio station, there were two generators that he'd run up every week just to power the station. He walked between them one day and started hearing a wah, wah, wah sound. You will know about that if you know anything about the binaural beats. Wonderful things happen with binaural beats, and that is the beginning of out-of-body experience. That is it. We discovered that using the binaural beats could have the potential of people having out-of-body experiences, and this was my experience, and I was a research subject for Robert Monroe for several years, and Sally and I did things where she would be a certain place around the country. Robert Monroe would have me there in the lab, and I would go out of body and find her or find other people or that kind of thing. So out-of-body experiences have been something I've done all my life. This is nothing new. Now at this point you may think I come from a whole family of nuts. You're absolutely right. My grandparents were my grandfather and his brother were Pentecostal healers. My great-grandmother was a Cherokee medicine woman, and it just goes on and on and on. So I'm very much living out my legacy, I guess, as I could say. But anyway, so Robert Monroe gave me before he died, gave me the patent for his Hemisync research. And I also brought a few tapes back there if you want to look into that. The third thing I want to say is to talk about as a psychologist. I did my internship and residency in Baylor College of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry in Houston. So I was there, it was the year that Sybil, the movie Sybil, came out. Well, I was really fascinated by that. And I asked the head psychiatrist there, could we have a seminar or something on multiple personality disorder? And here's what he told me. No, because it is so rare that you'll never see one in your practice. I just love that. Well, anyway, so what happened is that I ended up being in private practice in Oklahoma for 30 years and became known as a person that treats multiple personality disorders. And I had at any one time, I had 7 to 11 people that met the criteria, which I'm going to discuss in a minute, for D.I.D. or multiple personality disorder. Now, these are people that have been evaluated by Social Security and referred to me for treatment. This is not someone that I just met and dreamed up that they were MPD. So, anyway, so let me start off here by talking about the definition of near-death experience. This is right out of the website, and I would really encourage you to look at this and to play around with the website. A broad range of personal experiences associated with impending death, encompassing multiple possible sensations, including, and it can be any or all of these, or 2 or 3, whatever. Detachment from the body. That's everyone that has an NDE says that and acknowledges that they in some way go out of their body. It's Robert Monroe that did the research on how they go out of their body, which ways and so forth, but always a detachment from the body. By the way, I'm going to throw in a few things. If I get too religious on you, if you'll just raise your hand, I'll maybe shut up about it. But there are some things that are very, very interesting theologically to consider, and of course, kind of plunks my twanger when I think about that. But I can see people going out of their body, especially when they're praying. They always go out to the left side of their body. This is right out of Buddhist literature. This is nothing new that I invented or anything like that. It is there. And I used to, when I would lead people in prayers in the sanctuary, I'd look out and I would see the people that were really praying and the ones that were doing something else. Anyway, because I could see them move out of their bodies, and you can too. I get groups and I teach people how to do that. Feelings of levitation. That's sometimes initially fear or at least confusion. What in the world is happening to me? Can this be? Am I in my own NDE? I knew I was dying. I just knew I was. And I knew nothing about NDEs, had never heard about them before. I was just a young captain in the Air Force and didn't know anything about that except a little bit of hearing my grandparents talk. Often the total serenity, security, and warmth, just feeling good about this, moving past the fear. Hey, I'm going to be all right. This is a wonderful feeling. This is, and often at that time, the beginning of a life change with many subtle changes, many subtle changes. Now, this is the value of this whole thing. This is the value of this whole thing. Because what you're going to find out in this value, this whole thing, is that we're going to discuss the mind-body problem. We're going to learn things about that. And I will talk later about why I think that's so important. But this is, the NDE people are really, truly on top of something very, very important. And the subtle life changes are often very permanent. Not all NDEs produce a positive life changes. I want to say that. I worked with one man who I was with him when he had an N.D.E experience. I told him to get back in his body, and he has hated me ever since. It's not always a positive experience for some people. He did not want to come back. He did anyway, and was really quite angry at me for that. So, and it's a long story and well validated in one of my books. Absolute dissolution, in other words, falling apart. You leave your body. You just know that you are not going to ever be the same. The presence of light and conversation with a deity. Now, I want you to take kind of a mental snapshot of that, because as I move into talking about out-of-body experiences, D.I.D. experiences, you're going to see a lot of the same thing. So we're dealing with a cluster of experiences here that are varied and not exactly the same, but yet all contribute something to our own conversation and knowledge. I want to thank you, Bruce, also for helping me here. Okay, let's move for just a minute to the definition of out-of-body experiences. My great-grandmother used to call it spirit walking, where you leave your body and your spirit goes somewhere. That, by the way, I'm a Cherokee Indian. That's nothing new in the tribe. I mean, that's among Native Americans. That's nothing. You know, they'd say, okay, so what? You have out-of-body experience. Everybody does, don't they? So it's not anything. But anyway, it's an experience that typically involves a sensation of floating outside one's body, and in some cases, perceiving one's physical body from a place outside your own body. The literature is just full of this kind from surgeries, car wrecks, but this can be brought on spontaneously sometimes. And some people that really do this very frequently will, it'll be a difficulty to them sometimes. I've never heard of anyone going out of body while they were driving a car or doing anything that they needed to stay in their body. No, I really never have. People ask, well, what about, could it be that I go out of body when I'm driving a car? Well, or maybe they never lived to tell about it. I don't know, but anyway. But it does happen spontaneously, and Paul Robb talks about that in his book and in his talk. Often associated with trauma as the NDE experience. It can also be associated with different stages of sleep. Robert Monroe proved that with the tape. It can also be precipitated by a whole variety of drugs, about anything but vitamin C. If you get enough of it, it'll help. It can be associated with desire. I can pretty much, as many people can, go out of their body about any time you want to. And by binaural beats, meditation, brain stimulation, sensory deprivation, sensory overload. Years ago, I had a friend down the street that had a float tank. Anybody ever do a float tank? See, I thought all you Californians did this kind of thing, but I guess it was just us Oklahomans. But anyway, he had a float tank, and my kids used to just love it. They used to go down and float with me in the float tank, and just it just takes you into outer space just in a matter of seconds. So it's a lot of fun to do. But again, hypnosis, extreme effort, and like I say, at the bottom one is I wrote in prayer. I haven't said anything about that yet. All right. Okay. Let's move now to the third one, which is the definition for dissociative identity disorder, or the old multiple personality disorder. Okay, here it is, right out of the DSM-4. The presence of two or more distinct identities or personality states, each with its own relatively enduring pattern of perceiving, relating to, thinking about the environment, and self. That's the first thing you have to have. At least two of these identities or personality states recurrently take control of the person's behavior. Number 3, an inability to recall important personal information that is too extensive to be explained, by ordinary forgetfulness. So it's not just ordinary forgetfulness. And that's why a lot of these people are seen as liars and so forth, because they lose so much time. The next one is a disturbance that is not due to the direct physiological effects of any substances like alcohol, intoxication, or so forth, or a general medical condition like seizures. The last one is in children, the symptoms are not attributable to imaginary playmates or other fantasy play. All right, let's go to, and I'm going to start talking a little bit about the contemporary research and some of that you will hear about. By the way, the literature is full of this. It's just all over the place, and all you have to do is just dial it up on the internet, or there's lots of books that discuss this. The first thing that they have found is that about 97% of all people who suffer from D.I.D. were sexually abused as a child, and/or tortured, and I have found quite a few in Oklahoma cult type of activity, where animals were sacrificed, people were tortured, and so forth. And so these people often develop D.I.D. symptoms. It's really interesting, the kind of people that do develop these symptoms. There seems to be some kind of trigger inside of us to disassociate. Some people do not. Other people disassociate very easily. And what we believe psychologically is that it is certainly a defensive mechanism, a mechanism that helps people during a traumatic situation to literally take themselves out of the situation mentally and to just become something else. There becomes like a family within. And listen to what oftentimes these persons will say. There is a big white light. And when I step into that light, then I know that I am in the world and that something different is really happening with me. But this white light is there, and the alter, or the personality which is taking charge at that time, steps into the light, and it's like being on stage. So the alters will differ. The different personality structure will differ in voice, posture, handedness, left-handedness, right-handedness, brainwave patterns. These are all research that has been done at different medical schools. Immune status, GSR, skin electrical responses, reported life history, sex and age. There's often an opposite sex person inside there that you get to know. Different physical abilities, interpersonal skills. Some of them have extreme intellectual abilities. Some speak another language. Some have accents. One of the things that blew me away one time, a lady I was working with came in. She had a very high fever, and she says, I'm just so sick, but I wanted to come see you anyway. And I said, well, how are you feeling? She says, well, I'll be just a minute. And then she switched to another altar. Her fever was gone. I happened to have a thermometer there. Her fever was gone. Her face was not flushed. She really flipped into an altar that was not sick and did not have the flu. I saw it. I mean, things like these are so amazing. Pain management. That there are some of the alters that do not experience pain or can tolerate pain very well. Allergic responses, EEG responses. And the thing that I think that we need to be looking at and doing more research on is the ability to heal. And D.I.Ds do heal faster, no matter what, whether they break their leg, break their arm, have surgery, no matter what, they are able to do that. And the really interesting thing to me is how much younger they look. than their chronological age. So, and some of them can do very interesting things in peak performance, almost to the point where they're almost like a savant with a certain talent, that they can literally do things that'll just blow you away. So the idea of this has been difficult in I guess 40 years ago when I first set up practice and so forth. I took a case to Manager's Clinic. I lived in Oklahoma and wanted to go up to Topeka. And I mean, the doctors up there just really said, we just think you're really being taken advantage of. This just can't be. And I just went, kind of left there with my tail between my legs and just thought, so I have been criticized by my peers and so forth for doing and treating these kind of people and being so open about this. D.I.D is real, and it was when the Vietnam veterans that had been in concentration or been in camps and been tortured, when they returned and started telling me about their symptoms and also saying this is how I kept the pain away, is that I would either go out of my body or I would flip to a different altar and everything. So when you saw these men coming in that had been tortured, starting to do these same things, it was then I made up my mind I was no longer going to hide what I believe and had to speak out for this.